Great Rising family. This is Dr. Kia Pruitt. It's so good to see you all. Check in. Good morning, Golden Risings, Gold Rising. Happy, what is this, Tuesday? Good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending upon where you're checking in from. Check in, family. It's so good to see you. This again is Dr. Kia Pruitt. It is Tuesday, February the 21st, 2023, and the time is 10 o'clock a.m. Welcome in. We are so excited today to come back to bring you some exciting information, some of which you've been asking about as it relates to gold. So good morning. We have a wonderful reoccurring guest today. It's our great friend, Andy Schectman, the gold CEO, who I call the gold guru. He is the most sought after speaker in the precious metal space because he's been saying for a long time that we need to pay attention to the declining value of the dollar and consider precious metals because precious metals are wealth. Precious metals are also a hedge against inflation, and it's a great way to store your wealth and pass it down to your posterity. So I'm very, very happy to be a part of Andy's team. He is the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals Company. They are at $8 billion in sales. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Excellent customer service, and everybody that works for him is either family or he's been to school with them. So family members from all over the world, help me to welcome Andy Schectman. Now, he isn't, hi, Andy isn't able to join us on the live stream, but not video, but he is here on audio. So let us know if you can hear him. All right, Andy, back in your hands.
Kia, it's great to be here. You always have the most warm, endearing, welcoming introductions. It's hard to live up to, but great to be here. And thank you so much for your kind words. They're greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much for all the hard work that you've been doing over the years. I have to also pay homage to a mutual friend that we have, Chris Marcus. I need to have him on the show because he is the one that told me about you. And I remember he did a Silver Fest. And that's when I heard you speak. And I thought, oh my God, I would just be honored to just, just be in his presence one day because the two of you are just so amazing. So thank you. Thank you, Andy, for coming on our platform and sharing your wisdom. It's a great honor. Thank you.
The pleasure is mine. And I think it's nice to mention Chris Marcus and Arcadia Economics.
Yes.
He's a brilliant mind who has done a lot for the precious metals industry. As a sidebar, I would encourage everyone who owns precious metals and who has ever wondered about the manipulation of the gold market to Google Chris Marcus, Arcadia Economics / Bart Chilton, Chilton.
Okay.
Bart Chilton used to be, before he passed away, the head of the CFTC, which is the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. It is, in essence, the commodity police. And the interview between Chris and Mr. Chilton, I believe, is the most important precious metals related interview of our time. And I don't say that lightly. And he got Mr. Chilton to, in essence, admit on air that indeed the JP Morgan had manipulated the market. And it's an incredibly interesting and compelling story about all the things that we've been talking about for a very long time and validated by what was the head of a regulatory agency that oversees all of the commodity trading in the United States. Just a fantastic interview. I suggest everyone check it out.
Okay, I definitely will do that. And Chris had also said he would do a show for me too. So I'm going to have to call him and ask him to come on and even tell us in person what that interview was like with, what you call it, his name was Bart Chilton.
Bart Chilton,
okay.
That's correct.
Okay. People are saying hello, Andy, in the chat, and good morning, and they're happy to hear from you today.
Well, good morning to everyone, and it's good to be heard from. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Andy, what's going on in the precious metals space? I know we had a few minutes of chatting, and I was trying to hold my excitement in because this is in alignment with what you were talking about on the phone with me today, with some of the things you've been saying for years. And I've been looking at your videos now for about maybe 2 or 3 years. So it's like finally people are saying some of the same things you've been saying. So what's going on?
Yeah, it's very it's been a very interesting experience to be talking about things for the last almost 3.5 years that have come true.
Yes.
I've been doing this for 33 years, and there have been a lot of things that I thought would come true, and ultimately most of them have, but never when I thought they would. Mm-hmm. Usually much longer than I thought it would, because we come up with strategies based upon mathematics, economics, and logic. And when you apply something as immutable as mathematics, sprinkling some old school logic and some Austrian economics into the equation, more often than not, you're right. But the timing, when you have an administration who, and this is bigger than just the United States, let's say a Western administration or administrations, who have had a vested interest in keeping the ball up in the air, the variables that are injected into the equation change the timing of the outcome, but ultimately Mother Nature and mathematics always have a way of coming full circle. In other words, the bar tab always needs to be paid at some point. And I think that is what we are seeing happen more and more in relation to what I've been talking about regarding the BRICS nations. Now, when I mention the BRICS nations and the speed in which this is all happening, which is surprising me, I think it centers mostly around the weaponizing of the dollar, kicking Russia out of SWIFT, and the ramifications that has had globally, which has really lit a fuse under my thesis, which I will tell you has surprised even me at the speed at which it's been accelerating. Recently, we talk, most of my podcasts in the last 3 years, I have been building sort of a progression of events that over the last few years would happen gradually, weekly, monthly, and now things seem to be happening daily. The latest is the, I guess you could say, the union that is being made between Iran, China, Russia, and India. Iran, who is likely to become one of the very first new members of BRICS Plus, and also is the first West Asian state to become a full member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, also a member of the Eurasian Economic Union, EABU. They've become a strategic partner in both the Belt Road Initiative, the BRICS Plus, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And you put these three organizations or these three entities together, BRICS Plus, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the Belt Road Initiative, and you're talking north of 80% of the population. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization here is something that I don't talk about enough, but ought to. It is the largest regional economic, security, and military organization in the world. It comprises 30-40% of global GDP, close to 60% of human population in and of itself, and 60% of the global land mass of the Eurasian continent. And when you add that to the largest infrastructure project in human history ever attempted, that being the Belt Road Initiative, of which all 13 OPEC producing countries are part of course, the West is not. So when you add that to the BRICS, you're talking the majority of human population all working together against the West. And it's happening in an expedited fashion. Rossi, I believe his name, Raisi, just the other day, became the first Iranian president to officially visit China in over 2 decades. And this is a big deal. He joined Xi Jinping and supervised the signing of 20 bilateral cooperation agreements, and those range from agricultural, trade, tourism, environmental protection, health, disaster relief, culture, sports. And, you know, what you're seeing is the integration of a union of entities, not only that are all opposed diametrically to the hegemony of the West, but the perceived hypocrisy of the West. And it's a big deal. It really, really is a big deal. And I think, you know, it's clear that these countries are moving to a system that is going to be tied to gold. And I say that to you because the Shanghai Cooperation Organization has come out and publicly said that they intend to issue a gold-backed settlement currency for the Eurasian continent. The BRICS nations have told us that they intend to issue a reserve currency pegged to commodities. Now, the fact that gold was reclassified the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset in April of 2019, and the accumulation and production by the RICS and BRICS, Russia, China, India, South Africa, and all of the countries that are joining, it's extraordinary. You look at a country like Turkey, who has just pledged to join the BRICS, was the largest accumulator of gold in the world last year. You look at the majority of the countries who are on the BRICS Plus docket, those being the countries that will join next, and every single one of them just about has minimum of 20, as much as 80% of their international reserves or their country's reserves in gold. And it will be a system that will be dominated by transparency and commodities rather than a system that is opaque and is dominated by debt instruments like U.S. Treasuries and promises that I think are beginning to fail. When we look at what's happening in this country, it's terrifying. The projected Social Security funding deficit, we just got note, has increased from $71 trillion to $75.9 trillion. So when we talk about a $31 trillion debt, and these are the reasons on top of hegemony, on top of the hypocrisy perceived by the East, on top of the sanctions, all of these things that are driving these countries to the table. When you look at the mismanagement of the world reserve currency, we have a $31 trillion debt, which doesn't include things like Social Security, government and military pensions, Medicare and Medicaid. But the projected Social Security funding deficit, we just found out, went from 71 trillion to 75.9 trillion, and they are telling us will be fully depleted within the next decade. This is affecting 50 million people in the United States. We are being told on the 2022 balance sheet, the U.S. government, that student loans comprise the largest asset that the United States owns, 38.4% of the total federal assets. Now that's a liability to the consumers, but as an asset on the balance sheet of the U.S. government. We are being told that we have to raise the debt ceiling in order to continue funding what is our bankrupt system. And Janet Yellen said she had to go to extreme means to do so. And those extreme means centered around borrowing money from the postal retirement fund, the Social Security, the postal retirement fund, the disabled veterans retirement fund, and the civil servants retirement fund. And the very next article says they've decided to give another $40 billion to the Ukraine. We are a broke country. who is borrowing money not only to fund a war that we have no business in,
Mm-hmm.
but not only that, when you realize that it cost $700 billion last year just to pay the interest on the debt, we are borrowing money simply to pay the interest on money that we've already borrowed. We are a default country who just decided again, according to President Biden, a new military aid package worth $500 million, which includes anti-tank missiles, air surveillance radars, howitzers, shells, ammunition. I mean, at what point does this start to become clear that we are actually at war with Russia?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, in a court of law, if you provided someone the financing, the intelligence on where your victim was, and the weaponry to kill the victim, are you not an accomplice? And I think we are circling down a very, very dangerous path, one that I believe ultimately will really, really necessitate becoming a contrarian, will really, really necessitate looking at the world in a different way and realizing that the dollar is in very, very, very big trouble. And that's why I think, amongst many other reasons, we are beginning to see these kinds of things play out. Certainly happy to answer any questions that you have, but I mean, I could continue going on and talking about all of the things that are driving me crazy, but there are a lot of things there that I think I'm happy to unpack or answer any questions.
Oh, no, keep going. This is all about you just letting us know what's going on. One of the things you mentioned was about Janet Yellen talking about us reaching the debt ceiling and taking extraordinary measures to deal with that. So on the one hand, things look bad, but I believe on another hand, states are taking, as you told me, some measures to maybe offset that. Is that how I should interpret what the states are doing with the bills they're introducing?
I believe so. I mean, a lot of these states are wondering why we're sending billions of dollars with aid to the Ukraine when many of our own cities and infrastructure are crumbling. And some of the states that are moving in a different direction would be, for example, Wyoming, who just had a bill, Senate File 101, prompts the Wyoming State Treasurer to create a formal system to deal directly in constitutional money. And it's a system that would include holding gold as an asset. And I guess it would be a hedge against its exposure to dollars. And you know, the act declares that gold and silver shall be accepted as legal tender at their spot price plus market premium, and shall be receivable in payments of all debts, public and private, contracted for in the state of Missouri. The same thing is happening in the state of Wyoming. We also saw Kansas just recently introduce Bill HB 2405, eliminating capital gains on precious metals and proposing that they be used for legal tender, valued at spot plus premium. So this is beginning to happen all over the place, and I think a lot of it has to do with the horrific monetary and fiscal policies of this administration. And what better way to do it than finding an asset that allows you to detach from the lunacy of the Federal Reserve and their ridiculous monetary policy.
Wow. That's pretty exciting to have states that introduce precious metals as, you're saying, legal tender. So does that mean that it's constitutional money if it is legal tender?
Yeah, so, well, it would be introduced not only as legal tender, but as legal tender for payments. As it is right now, the American Eagle is considered legal tender. It's not currency. But these governments are recognizing gold and silver now as legal tender for payments, not only in retail establishments, but but also in payment of property tax and payments to the state. It's a very big step in the right direction.
Wow.
And I think that you will see this become really maybe the fuse that lights the fire to waking up the public.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about public participation in the precious metal space, it amounts to 1/2 of 1% of the entire financial matrix, from Joe Sixpack all the way to the Harvard Endowment Fund and everything in between. When you see these states taking the initiative and using inflation and mismanagement of monetary and fiscal policy as incentive to move in this direction, I really do believe it will awaken people. Look, last year we saw a 20+% drop in the S&P 500 and a 16% drop in the 10-year Treasury, which is supposed to be the conservative portion of people's portfolio. Was the worst performing year of the 10-year Treasury ever. And as a result, I think people are beginning to wake up. You see the states start to take initiative, and very, very quickly it will ignite the monetary accumulation phase of this game that I think could very, very quickly change the landscape of the entire precious metals market.
Wow.
You know, for the last 30 years, as far long as I've been doing this, gold and silver were considered, a fringe hedge at best. But I believe countries like the BRICS nations, China, Russia, India, South Africa, and many others that are on a buying spree because gold was reclassified the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset. And now the states are beginning to look at gold and silver for what they truly are, and that is money, while the currency in our wallets that we have been told is money is losing a minimum of 8% per year, or has been on average for the last few. And when you really look at the way that the CPI calculates inflation and just simply backtrack it to the way it used to be calculated prior to the changing, the repetitive changing of the gauge of measuring inflation to suit an inflationary agenda, it's probably more like 15%. I am at a conference or a meeting in Palm Beach today. Just had breakfast at a restaurant. Now, mind you, it's a very lovely hotel, very expensive hotel where the meeting is being held at. But breakfast for one was $64.
Wow.
And if you tell me there isn't inflation, I was in Canada for a few weeks ago for a conference, and had the good fortune of going to another very expensive hotel, the Four Seasons. I was taken there by Royal Canadian Mint Distributor to go skiing in Whistler, Canada, up in British Columbia. And I'll grant that this was the Four Seasons, but for 2 eggs Benedict, a half a pot of coffee, and an orange juice, it was $140. Now, this may be poor examples of what inflation is, but whether you're going to the grocery store in your hometown, paying your insurance, paying tuition, paying things that we need, less that we want, I think indeed you're seeing that inflation is exactly accentuating in ways that are making people wake up to alternatives to a dollar system that is precipitously losing value.
Yes. Yeah. And oftentimes, in order to wake people up, they have to be affected in their purse and their pockets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is something that will continue when you realize that the government in their 2022 forecast, in their balance sheet forecast, that the national debt will reach more than 500% of GDP in the next few years. And you're talking a banana republic. And one of the things that was I thought very interesting was that when you talk about Janet Yellen, and how she has to sign off on this. On the cover letter of the 2022 balance sheet, she talked about how great the economy is, not a single word of caution. And interestingly enough, she praised the Inflation Reduction Act as our nation's most aggressive action to tackle climate crisis. I thought to myself, wait a second, what the hell is she talking about? Climate crisis? I thought it was supposed to reduce inflation. And they're not even lying to us anymore that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to reduce inflation. It's just a climate change legislation masquerading as economic support. And look, I think the bottom line is simply this, that the United States is depleting its resources, not just in terms of its natural resources, but things that made it great, like freedom, like capitalism, like military strength, fiscal restraint, social cohesion. These are all things that made this country great that are breaking apart. We used to never be defined by the president we voted for in the last election. And I think that's changing. And these are the reasons, Pia, why you are seeing not only countries massively move away from the West and accumulate gold, the world's only other tier one reserve asset. I can't say that enough. Yeah. The world's only other tier one reserve asset other than US dollars. But now we are beginning to see the states wake up. And I think it's kind of a trickle down phenomenon where you will see large entities such as central banks, commercial banks, how the states, very wealthy private investors like family offices and sovereign wealth funds. And the last transition will be the public at large. And it's one of the reasons that the public usually is not successful in investing, because they are late to the party.
Yes.
And the big money is using the suppression of the Western system, suppression of COMEX, the commodity exchange, where with leverage they can control the price of gold and silver to run cover for their de-dollarization and their acquisition or accumulation of metals. And that is what is throwing the public off the scent. And by the time they figure it out, the big entities like the states and the commercial banks and the central banks and the sovereign wealth funds and the family office will already be positioned, as we are able to see happening right now.
Can you explain what a tier one asset is? You said gold is the only tier one asset other than, I guess, the US dollar?
That's right.
Okay.
So a tier one asset is a riskless asset as defined by central banks.
Okay.
At the end of World War II, they made the dollar, they being the US government, made the dollar. At the end of World War II at Bretton Woods, the Allies met to anoint the dollar the world reserve currency, replacing the pound sterling. And at that time, the only tier one reserve asset would have been US dollars and treasuries, which are basically a riskless asset, collateral. In other words, if I loan you $1 million, and I write you a check for $1 million, but as collateral, you give me a briefcase filled with $100 bills that total $1 million. That's tier one. I have no risk. If you don't pay me back, so be it. I have your $1 million in collateral. Well, that's the way U.S. dollars, or in this case, gold, are being viewed by central banks. The ultimate form of collateral with zero liability or risk. And so it's a big deal. And I often ask myself, why would the Bank of International Settlements, which is the central banker's central bank, why would they reclassify gold as the only other tier one asset rather than something else? Why gold, after nearly 80 years of it only being US dollars, did they quietly reclassify gold as the only other tier one asset? And if you look closely, you can see the central banks have gone on a buying spree that started 2 years before that reclassification.
Wow.
You know, it's obviously they were clued into the reclassification, and it wasn't just the accumulation, it is the repatriation. most of the countries of the world have kept their gold with the Bank of England or the New York Fed because they were closest to the liquidity spigot of the COMEX market and the London Metals Exchange. And now they have all requested repatriation, meaning send it home, we want control of it. And then they've been accumulating it because the most powerful bank in the world, the Bank of International Settlements, has told us that, well, now gold is the only other tier one reserve asset next to US dollars. So what it basically means is it is providing them a vehicle for de-dollarization that I truly do believe will be a peg to a new system. You cannot continue to do what all governments have done since the beginning of time, and that is to choose inflation over austerity if given the choice.
Right.
So what gold represents is a governor, if you will, to the rampant money creation and reckless monetary policy by officials who believe that you can just print yourself into prosperity. And I think that is one of the big reasons why you're seeing the accumulation. And if you look at a system with the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Belt Road Initiative, which is a cohesion of many different countries and cultures, you know, people say, well, the euro didn't work because you have all these cultures that are clashing with one another. And I buy that. And you could see the same thing with these groups. It is the rallying cry against the Western sanctions and the perceived hypocrisy and the homogeny of the West that is getting everyone to the table on an equal basis to a new system using distributed ledger technology. I believe that will provide the glue or the immutability of a new system that will work, because you have everyone pledging the same amount where everyone has equal say at the table based upon what they are pledging to a new system. And I think it gives it immediate credibility. So it's a very big deal when you realize that it is the only other tier one reserve asset and it is being accumulated in the way that it is. It makes it much easier to understand how it's happening, why it's happening, and why the suppression of price is being used to run cover for the accumulation.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that very thorough explanation, because sometimes you hear words, the tier one asset, those are things, that type of phrase I've never heard before a couple, like maybe 2 years ago. So to hear somebody in the precious metal space to explain it in detail is very helpful. Thank you.
Of course, of course.
One of the questions somebody asked, they said, well, I'm new to this, so how much silver, how much gold should I invest in? I hear that question a lot, and I know I've asked you that before, but people are starting to, they want to respond to what they see going on. They see the dollar being dropped. You know, they experience the high inflation as you explained. So they see banks buying up record amounts of gold. So they, what can I do if I don't have a lot of money, is what someone asked. Where do I start?
Every journey starts with a step. And while there is no right or wrong answer, I would ask that question backwards. What exposure do you want to a system that is admittingly, by their own admission, north of $130 trillion in debt? Everyone focuses on the $31 trillion national debt, which excludes the $76 trillion unfunded liability of Social Security, which excludes the commitments of Medicare and Medicaid, government military pensions that push us to $130 trillion plus in debt, which the government in their last balance sheet says ultimately in the next decade will be 500% of GDP. That is officially a banana republic. A trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. Game is over. It's just what triggers the end game, what triggers it. And we're living on borrowed time. And I think when you look at the indebtedness, most of which was accumulated at the lowest interest rates in human history, the rising of rates only exacerbates that pain. And if you see a massive dumping of dollars, because Saudi Arabia has agreed to not only join BRICS, has not only pledged their most important trading partner for this year and the next 50 in oil is China, but also just admitted in Davos last week that they are open to taking other currencies for oil. The simultaneous dumping of dollars by the world, who has had to own dollars since 1974 in order to purchase oil. If given an opportunity, remember, all 13 of the OPEC countries are on the Belt Road Initiative. Think of what Saudi Arabia just told the world. Think of how Saudi Arabia and Nigeria signed joint military cooperation agreements with Russia. The pieces are being put into place. And when that happens and the dollars are dumped, triggering a massive spike in interest rates to compensate for the tsunami of inflation hitting our shores, it becomes a religious experience for everyone as stocks, bonds, and real estate collapse. And so you ask yourself, what exposure do you want to that system? What gold and silver are to me is not an investment, it is wealth.
Yes.
Wealth that I think is most important in times of uncertainty, and it's proven that throughout all of time. So I'm not here telling people to buy gold and silver to get wealthy. I'm telling people to accumulate it because it is wealth.
That's right. That's right. And, you know, I grew up studying the Torah and the Bible, the scriptures. And one of the scriptures say that a wise man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. Of course, the rest of that says, yes, sir, the wealth of the wicked is laid up for the righteous. And when I was in, you know, a lot of people, when you grow up in a poor community, they kind of focus on, well, the wealth of the riches is stored up for the righteous, rather than teaching you how to store up wealth, how to create wealth and pass that on for your posterity. So that's what I appreciate.
That's true. And I often say, you know, I have some, after all of these years doing this, I have some trite phrases and buzzwords, but you know, long after the dollar bills in your wallet, Kia, are hanging from a frame in the Smithsonian as an example of what was. Gold and silver will be wealth, and that's why leaving gold and silver as a legacy for your children and your children's children is real. It's outlived 2 world wars and German hyperinflation and the Great Depression and everything the world has thrown at it. And I think that it is still immutable wealth. This is the reason to own it, and this is the reason that you are seeing a break away from the West. You know, these countries in and of themselves could have never stood up to the West even a decade ago. You put them all together and they become a very formidable foe that I believe is coming together against the West because of the sanctions and the perceived hypocrisy, but is using commodities as the glue to make it all work. When you look at the BRICS nations as an example, and I'm not sure how many years each country retains the presidency, but it rotates. This year it's in South Africa. When you compare that to the International Monetary Fund, the United States has veto rights because they have the largest share of voting rights. That is not a successful enterprise when one country dominates. Give everyone equal footing based upon what they're pledging to the system. It does. It works. And I think that this is exactly the trend that we are seeing. It's interesting. As a side note, the International Monetary Fund published a report a few weeks ago titled Gold as an International Reserve, a Barbarous Relic No More. So you have 150 countries from around the world who are now telling us that gold is an international reserve, that it is not a barbarous relic. and I think the Tier 1 reclassification of it and the accumulation by the biggest money in the world is indication of that. So it's not how much gold should you own, it's what exposure do you want to a Keynesian system that is really, I think, on its way out, arguably, in terms of its singular world reserve status. And if we lose the petrodollar status, then it happens in a very, very, very expedient fashion, one where it will catch everyone off guard. And this is why it's so important to be prepared now before anything like this happens. But if you take a step back and look closely objectively, you can see the chessboard is moving against the West, and when you realize that it comprises well north of 75% of human population, it's a big deal, and a deal that I think will become much bigger as time rolls on.
Yes, it almost looks like to me, Andy, with all of these countries leaving the West, dropping the United States dollar, returning to other commodities, including gold, the states responding to that by also introducing bills to make gold essentially, one day be used as money. It kind of seems like you could either look at it as the glass half empty, as somebody said, like this is we should be worried, this is scary, or you can look at it as the glass half full, like maybe we're getting rid of that old system where they were printing money. Maybe we're behind the scenes getting rid of the Federal Reserve. Maybe we're restoring the Constitution. That's the way it feels. Do you have a response to that?
I think it is the beginning salvo of that, exactly what it is. In the Constitution, accepting or creating money that is not species, gold and silver, was considered treasonous. We've made such a massive departure from the Constitution that our officials use the Constitution only when it's convenient. But indeed, we have made a massive departure away from constitutional money into money that is being deceptively debased right out from under us. So yes, I think there will become a louder and louder rallying cry to move away from it. And as these states do it, I think it will be will incite other states like Kansas to do the exact same thing. And God bless them for doing it.
Absolutely.
I think that it certainly is a precursor to other states waking up to moving away from a system that is costing their citizens purchasing power.
Yes.
The dollar is being inflated away right up from underneath us, and that's not good if you're on a fixed income or just trying to put food on the table. And that's what these states are doing. They're protecting their citizens, and not only that, they're protecting their own balance sheet by calling gold and silver money, adding it to their balance sheet, and accepting it for payments in tax receipts. I think it's probably just the beginning.
I agree. Speaking of spending power, I've heard that when you're on a gold standard, or when people start to use gold as money, that it will increase your spending power and that the prices will be lower. Is that true?
Well, it's not. It may not be lower, but stable. Most importantly, gold and silver will provide price stability. You go back and look at when we were on the gold standard, prices were stable. When you have rampant money creation and inflation, you have prices that continue to increase. The Fed's mandate of 2% inflation is something I've never understood. Why have a mandate of 2% inflation? How about negative inflation? The lower the inflation, the higher the standard of living.
Yes.
But as you continue to inflate the currency, prices continue to rise. And so, when you're looking at the cost or the value of your dollar over the last, over your lifetime, just think of how much $100 was when you were in high school. What you could have done with that.
Yes.
And now what does $100 buy you? This is a real phenomenon, and it is courtesy of the Federal Reserve, who, much like every other government, has chosen inflation as a pathway, if you will, to monetary policy.
Absolutely. Thank you for answering that question, because I hear a lot of things about how glorious it would be on the gold standard, or using gold as money. And so it makes me excited, but it's always good to hear confirmation or hear it from somebody like you, an expert, which you are. So thank you.
Absolutely. Pleasure is mine.
So people in the comment section are saying the same thing I was feeling, and as we're enjoying hearing those birds in your background, they sound so happy.
Yeah, well, it's a lovely place I'm at. There's no question about it. It's certainly not Minneapolis, but the birds are too cold to chirp in Minneapolis right now.
Wow. I think, let's see, anything else, Andy, you want to bring to our attention about
No,
what's
I
going
think,
on?
I think that we've done a very good job over the last few weeks of chatting, talking about all of these things. And what I do want to do on our weekly episode, Kia, is to continue to drive down this linear progression of events that continue to accelerate and continue to unfold. And I promise to do that and to bring that to you and your listeners each and every week with unfolding developments that are shocking me at the speed in which they are progressing, and much faster than they were even a year ago.
Yes.
And I think there'll be lots and lots to talk about as we continue to move through 2023, not only with the effects of monetary policy, which haven't really hit the markets yet. They will by April, May, or June. Typically, the interest rate increases have a 6 to 9 month lag time before they really start to affect the economy. Not only here domestically, but more importantly, the unfolding events geopolitically with the BRICS nations, with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with the Belt Road, and all of the countries that are joining this massive chorus of countries. That really, in my opinion, is the only thing people should be focusing on. The monetary policy, as dictated by Fed Chairman Powell, is a sideshow, in my opinion. It is periphery. The balloons that we're shooting down, it's all misdirection. What is happening on a larger scale, the value of the currency, and to the reactions of administration that's lost its bearing to a country that will steal money from the Postal Service's retirement fund, the Disabled Veterans Retirement Fund, and the Civil Servants Retirement Fund to give $100 billion to the Ukraine, to a country where $5 billion for border protection is too much, letting in 5 million illegals and drugs pouring across the border, yet $100 billion to the Ukraine is okay. A country where a $1.75 trillion omnibus bill issued by an insolvent country who has to borrow money to create that bill specifically says no money will be earmarked for U.S. border, but has $470 million earmarked for border protection of Jordan, Oman, Lebanon. I don't understand the things that this country is doing, the policies that our leaders are doing is destabilizing the country in a big way and creating massive divisiveness. And these are the things not only that we should be focusing on, but also I think the major impetus for why you are seeing so many of these countries, including former allies like Mexico, like Egypt, like Turkey, express interest in joining the BRICS nations and applying for it.
And it's interesting because now I was telling you earlier this morning that a lot of the things you're saying now, people are affirming your message. For example, billionaire John Paulson is telling people it's better to invest in gold. You take your fiat dollars and invest in gold rather than holding on to the United States dollar. I thought that was very interesting.
Well, one of the reasons that John Paulson would say that, he's one of the wealthiest men in the world, is that there's a term in economics called Gibson's paradox, which is the inverse relationship between gold and real interest rates. And real interest rates versus nominal interest rates is very easy. Nominal interest rates are the interest rates that you see quoted, the number that you see quoted. Real interest rates are when you subtract inflation from it. So if you realize that interest rates, real interest rates in gold are inversely correlated, it is because gold is a non-interest bearing asset. And so if you realize that when you take the interest rate on the 10-year Treasury right now, call it 4%, and you subtract inflation from that, your real return is, if you believe the CPI, which we know is a lie, it's a negative 3% compounding over 10 years. If you realize that the CPI, as measured by its previous metrics prior to 1980, before they change it, would be north of 15%, then your real return on a 10-year Treasury is negative 11% compounding. Who in their right mind would buy anything that offers a negative real return when you can own gold that pays nothing, but yet has been viewed as money for 5,000 years? And this is the reason why someone like John Paulson was considered one of the most legendary investors ever in the United States would make that statement. He's been invested in gold for quite some time. I think he's just making it a little bit more well known. And it's not just him that you're seeing. You're seeing a lot of these hedge fund advisors coming out talking about owning gold instead of dollars, simply because of the negative real return you're receiving on fixed income.
I see. Last week when you were on, I was asking you, how can we prepare for all these things that we see happening with the economy, with the devaluation of the dollar, high inflation? You said, do what the big money is doing.
That's exactly right. Well, that's exactly right. You do as they do, not as they say. That's exactly right. And the biggest money in the world has been doing this now for quite some time. So yeah, that is the way to do it. And the biggest money misdirects not only with price, but also with rhetoric. And so a guy like John Paulson is considered a maverick, but because he's actually out there talking about it, bucking the system, if you will. But yeah, I think he's certainly a good model to follow.
So speaking of follow the money, if people are interested in adding precious metals to their portfolio, maybe asking you questions about gold IRAs and storage, how can they contact you, Andy? What should they do?
They would want to send an email right now to info@milesfranklin.com. That's info@milesfranklin.com. Say Dr. Pruitt sent me. And I will make sure that they get the best price in the country, that they will get personalized service from a company that in 33 years, no, actually 34 this month, has never had a customer complaint. We are U.S. Mint authorized resellers, one of only 24 in the world. And what really differentiates us in a market that is homogenous, if you will, where you're just buying a commodity that is the same no matter whom you buy it from, would be the reputation and our United States Mint accreditation and our state of Minnesota licensing. It is a federally non-regulated industry where almost every company in North America has boycotted the state of Minnesota because they too would need to be subservient to the Commissioner of Commerce with licensing, bonding, and background checks, the only state in America where that holds true. So we're very proud of our reputation, but the United States Mint accreditation and, more relevant, the state of Minnesota licensing and bonding holds us to a higher standard than virtually every company in America. Much to the same tune, my great honor to be associated with someone of your extreme high moral character, nothing but respect and admiration for you.
Thank you.
Put it all together, we will make sure that it is a fantastic experience for your listeners, your followers. It would be our honor to help them de-dollarize like the most sophisticated money in the world has been doing now for quite some time.
Thank you so much, Andy, and thank you for your very kind words.
No, but they're true, and I think anyone who listens to you knows it.
Thank you. Thank you. I always say that it's very important, if you're listening to someone or if you're doing business with someone, that person should have a high moral character and good business ethics. And that's one of the reasons why I'm honored to even have you on the podcast, and I'm honored to be an affiliate with Miles Franklin. Additionally, Andy, people all over the country have said to me, and even people from Canada, that doing business with you has been a great pleasure, and that your brokers are very personable and they feel like they're talking to family members and friends. So thank you so much for building
that. That's such good news. I love to hear that. Thank you, Kia. And I'm excited to do this with you each and every week through 2023, because I think on top of the very important things that you talk about daily on your show, I think this is another very important topic that will provide continual challenge to keep on top of what's going on. And so if people are working on bettering themselves in many different ways, financially is just as important. And not even bettering, that's the wrong word, just awareness of what's happening and unfolding in very important and ever-changing ways of happening at a speed that has really shocked me. So I'd like to walk down this road with you and your listeners together and see where it takes us.
All right. Yes, we're going to follow the yellow brick road all the way home.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be honored to do so.
Thank you. So where can people find you? I know you used to do, I don't know if you're still doing a podcast on Twitter once a week.
We are going to increase our podcasts on Twitter, and we'd like to have you as a guest on that show. And people can find me just by simply Googling my name, Andy Schectman, and hitting videos. There's about 11,000 of them.
Wow.
Last week, I did 17 podcasts on various shows. We're going to start doing it our own show here very, very soon. Not just the Twitter spaces, but I'm easily found here. And so we will have you on our show as one of our very first guests as soon as we launch that in the next week or two.
Thank you. I'd be honored. And I also listen to you on Liberty and Finance.
Every Tuesday.
Okay.
Every Thursday on the original Mark Z. Every Monday on Arcadia Economics with Chris Marcus. Every Wednesday with Silver Slayer. So I'm out there, certainly, but it's a distinct pleasure and honor to be talking to your people.
Thank you. And I'm grateful to be among you and such wonderful people. All those people you named, I follow. So I'm in good company.
You sure are. Well, likewise.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, any final thoughts, Andy, before we conclude the podcast for today?
Just trust your gut. We are in a period of time that is considered uncharted waters, and any advice you get from anyone that considers themselves a financial expert will simply be making an educated guess, myself included. Make a list of people who you can trust and try to follow and educate yourself, and then trust your gut. That's the biggest thing that I would say. Just simply trust your gut, because there is no playbook at this point for where we are. And I think that's probably the best financial advice I could give you, and it will be your best financial advisor.
Absolutely. So thank you. Thank you for taking time away from your family and then away from your conference to come and speak to us, Andy. It's always a great pleasure having you here.
The pleasure is mine. I look forward to chatting with you and everyone else next week. And you have a great rest of your week. Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So family, you heard from the Gold Guru, the Gold CEO. And actually, I got that phrase, the Gold CEO, from Liberty and Finance. So I have to give them honor for calling him the Gold CEO, calling Andy Schectman the Gold CEO. Is it Kaiser Dunnigan or his dad?
Dunnigan Kaiser. Yeah.
Dunnigan Kaiser. Okay. Yeah. So he calls him the Gold CEO. I call him the Gold Guru. Family, you've heard some wonderful information from Andy. Again, if you're interested in precious metals, adding them to your portfolio, contact Andy by email at info@milesfranklin.com. He or one of his brokers will send you a price list and a list of inventories and a weekly specials. And then they'll take your order and answer any questions that you might have. Make sure in that email you leave your phone number so that you can receive a phone call and you will have a wonderful experience. Andy guarantees it. And again, he's not had one customer complaint, and an A+ business rating with the Better Business Bureau. So I know we said something to raise your vibrations and inspire you to create the most amazing, magnificent life that you desire and deserve. Bye, family. Make this a great day. See you later, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kia. Stay well.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.